the buzz of Washington, D.C. was louder than usual. It was a Thursday morning, and the halls of the Rayburn House office building vibrated with the tension of 1,000 whispered conversations. Something big was coming, something beyond policy debates or budget battles. Jasmine Crockett, the Democratic firebrand from Texas's 30th District, strode through the marble-floored corridors with the confidence of someone who had seen it all and wasn't afraid of the next fight. A former civil rights attorney, Crockett was known for her sharp wit, fiery speeches, and unshakable commitment to calling out hypocrisy no matter which side of the aisle it came from. Her office, room 2306, had become a meeting point for progressive thinkers and restless activists. On this particular morning, she was finalizing her remarks for the Oversight Committee hearing that was just an hour away. The topic, transparency and accountability in the executive branch. But that wasn't what had everyone on edge. The reason the press was swarming the building like bees to honey? The newly appointed White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, was set to testify. It was the first time in over 2 decades that a sitting White House press secretary had agreed to appear before Congress in such a setting, and Leavitt, young, polished, and unapologetically combative, wasn't coming to play nice. Having served under President Donald Trump during his second term, she was quickly becoming a rising star among conservatives, known for her icy delivery and ruthlessly efficient takedowns of the press. Everyone expected sparks. What they got was a firestorm. The hearing room was packed. Journalists crammed into every available seat. Staffers lined the walls. The temperature was cold, but the tension was blistering. As Leavitt entered, dressed in a sharp white blazer and heels that clicked like a metronome of confidence, the murmurs grew into a low hum. Crockett watched her from across the room with narrowed eyes, her jaw set. There was no love lost between them. A month earlier, Leavitt had gone on national television and referred to certain progressive lawmakers as grandstanding obstructionists who prefer soundbites to substance. While she hadn't named Crockett directly, everyone knew who she meant. Crockett had fired back on X, formerly Twitter, calling Leavitt a glorified spin machine in heels. Now they were face-to-face. Committee Chair Representative Tom Gallagher, a moderate Republican from Pennsylvania, opened the hearing with the usual procedural language. But the room only really woke up when it was Crockett's turn. "Ms. Leavitt," she began, her voice cool, "you've made quite the reputation for yourself, dodging facts, spinning narratives, and disrespecting the intelligence of the American public. Today, we expect something a little different. Honesty." Leavitt smiled faintly, folding her hands on the table. "Congresswoman Crockett, I'm honored to be here. And I'm sure the American people appreciate your passion, even if it sometimes outpaces your facts." A collective "oh" rose from the back of the room. Crockett's lips curled, but she didn't blink. "Facts," she said, leaning forward. "Let's talk about facts. Fact, your administration has refused to release visitor logs for Mar-a-Lago. Fact, there are ongoing ethics concerns about senior officials and private business interests. Fact, the American people are watching and they deserve answers, not rehearsed talking points." Leavitt didn't flinch. "Congresswoman, with all due respect, your party has spent more time on partisan theatrics than actually helping Americans. The president is focused on results. You're focused on headlines." The room went silent. Crockett's hands tightened into fists on the desk. For a split second, you could see it, the spark of rage. She leaned in close, voice low but charged like a lightning bolt. "You want to talk headlines? Let's make one right now. Tell this committee, under oath, whether the president had any conversations with campaign donors about cabinet appointments." Leavitt blinked. It was the first moment of visible hesitation. Chairman Gallagher interrupted. "Order, Congresswoman, But Crockett wasn't done. "Answer the damn question." The committee chamber was frozen in a moment of collective breath-holding. Jasmine Crockett's challenge still rang in the air like a shot. Journalists' fingers hovered above keyboards. Cameras zoomed in. Even the interns stopped pretending to take notes. Karoline Leavitt, for all her carefully crafted composure, felt the heat. Her polished media training had carried her through ambush interviews and primetime battles on Fox and CNN. But this was different. This wasn't a press conference. This was a congressional record. She adjusted the microphone slowly, buying herself a second. "Congresswoman," she said, voice flatter now, "any conversations the president has with private individuals are appropriately vetted by legal counsel and the ethics committee. I'm not authorized to discuss private meetings." Crockett didn't blink. "So you won't deny it?" "I'm not confirming anything either," Leavitt countered smoothly. Crockett leaned back in her chair, shaking her head with a bitter chuckle. "That's not transparency. That's cowardice wrapped in a press release." The crowd murmured again. Chairman Gallagher's gavel slammed once. "Order." We will maintain order in this chamber. But order was already slipping. The hearing was off script and America was watching. MSNBC had gone to live coverage. Fox News was already framing it as Leavitt under fire from radical left. Social media was lighting up with hashtag Crockett versus Leavitt trending within minutes. Leavitt tried to pivot. If you're truly interested in ethics, perhaps we should ask about the questionable stock trades made by your colleagues on both sides of the aisle right before key policy announcements. Crockett's eyes narrowed. Don't deflect, Ms. Leavitt. This isn't about my colleagues. This is about your White House and the fact that y'all treat oversight like an optional suggestion. Leavitt responded, voice rising slightly, what's optional? Congresswoman is pretending like the country isn't better off than it was 4 years ago. Lower crime, fewer foreign entanglements, energy independence. Tell that to the single moms in my district who can't afford insulin because your administration gutted the price caps. Crockett snapped. And tell my constituents, Leavitt shot back, why you spent more time on late-night talk shows than writing legislation. It was raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal. The entire room was now a cauldron of political tension. Gallagher banged his gavel again, but even he knew he'd lost the floor. This was no longer a hearing, it was a battle of ideology, style, and raw political will. Crockett stood, refusing to be silenced. You come in here with your rehearsed lines and smirks, acting like you're some kind of patriot. But all I see is someone who's selling fiction to a nation desperate for truth. Leavitt's voice went cold. And all I see is a congresswoman more interested in being a viral clip than a leader. At that, the room exploded. Some gasped, some clapped, others shouted over each other. Staffers scrambled to calm the scene. The chairman called for a recess, but it was too late, the moment had gone nuclear. Jasmine Crockett turned sharply and left the dais, her heels clicking furiously against the tile as she stormed toward the hallway. Cameras chased her like moths to flame. Karoline Leavitt, still seated, reached for her water and took a slow sip, her eyes coolly watching Crockett's retreat. But the battle wasn't over. Not even close. Outside, under the blinding lights of the press pool, Crockett stopped. Her chest heaved with adrenaline. She could feel the reporters swarming, microphones being shoved in her face, voices asking over each other. Congresswoman Crockett, do you stand by your comments? Do you regret the confrontation with Ms. Leavitt? Was this a calculated move? She raised her hand. Silence fell. Crockett's voice was steady, but fire still danced behind her eyes. I don't regret a damn thing, she said. The American people deserve more than sanitized lies and policy by press conference. They deserve the truth. And I'll fight to give it to them, even if it means going toe-to-toe with the White House itself. The crowd erupted again. And just down the hall, behind closed doors, Karoline Leavitt smiled faintly. She hadn't come to play defense. She'd come to draw lines in the sand. And Jasmine Crockett had just stepped across one. By nightfall, the confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt had overtaken every major news outlet. CNN replayed the clash in a continuous loop, commentators debating whether Crockett had gone too far or whether Leavitt had finally been exposed. Fox News ran with a different angle entirely, hailing Leavitt as the woman who put a progressive firebrand in her place. Twitter was a battleground of memes, hot takes, and political mudslinging. But beneath the media frenzy, the real storm was just beginning. In a private meeting room deep in the Capitol basement, away from the cameras and marble halls, Crockett sat at a long oak table surrounded by a tight circle of trusted aides and fellow lawmakers. She looked calm, but her foot tapped beneath the table, an unconscious drumbeat of impatience and adrenaline. We've got them on their heels, said Representative Darren Wallace, a progressive ally from Illinois. Leavitt wasn't ready for the question. If we push now, we might get the White House to release something, visitor logs, emails, something we can use. Crockett nodded. We don't let up. We go public with the ethics demands. Letters, subpoenas, op-eds, hell, I'll go on every Sunday show they'll let me. Her chief of staff, Monica, looked up from her phone. You're trending at #1. You've got Gen Z calling you the Truth Bay. Crockett smirked, but only for a second. Great. Let's see if Truth Bay can crack the executive branch. Meanwhile, back at the White House, Karoline Leavitt sat in a sleek West Wing conference room, flanked by senior communications advisors and legal counsel. President Trump wasn't in the room, he didn't need to be. His presence loomed in every word they spoke. You got clipped on the cabinet appointments question, said James Hanley, the White House counsel. We need to lock that down before it spirals. Leavitt crossed her arms. She ambushed me. The question was bait and I didn't bite. It doesn't matter, snapped Deputy Chief of Staff Claire Barlow. The public saw hesitation. That's blood in the water. Crockett's building a case. We need to change the narrative. Karoline leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the flickering TV in the corner. Crockett's fiery speech outside the chamber was playing on loop. She wants a war, Karoline said flatly. Let's give her one. The next morning, a damning op-ed hit the Washington Herald alleging that Jasmine Crockett's 2022 campaign had accepted donations from a tech lobbying group that later benefited from a broadband infrastructure bill she co-sponsored. The timing was too perfect. The sources were anonymous. The evidence was thin, but it didn't matter. Cable pundits jumped on it. Leavitt didn't even need to comment. Her allies in conservative media did it for her. But Crockett knew where it came from. At 9:13 a.m., her phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Hope you enjoyed your 15 minutes. Back off. K. Crockett stared at the screen, hands trembling just slightly. It wasn't just a fight over policy anymore. It was personal. It was calculated. It was war. By midday, Crockett was back in her office. The op-ed printed out and laid flat on her desk. Monica stood beside her, furious. This is coordinated. The Herald doesn't run stories like this without a nudge from someone high up. We traced the comms. We'll find it came from someone in Leavitt's team. Crockett didn't speak for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the Capitol dome, gleaming under the spring sun. They think I'll fold, she said finally. They think if they hit me hard enough, I'll shut up and sit down. She turned back, eyes steel. Let's subpoena the visitor logs. Every one of them. I want every name, every dollar, every phone call logged. If the White House wants to turn this into a street fight, fine. But they better be ready to bleed too. By the end of the day, the Oversight Committee had received formal paperwork for an ethics inquiry into potential donor influence over executive appointments. The White House called it a baseless, politically motivated witch hunt. Crockett called it just the beginning. Leavitt, watching from the press briefing room, offered a polished, icy smile to reporters. Congresswoman Crockett is entitled to her opinions, she said. But facts? That's another matter. Behind her back, she clenched her fist. Because for all her confidence, she knew Crockett wasn't bluffing. And the walls were closing in. 3 days later, Washington, D.C. was a powder keg. Karoline Leavitt stood at the White House press podium, facing a sea of flashing cameras and skeptical eyes. Her expression was pristine, a calm mask honed by hundreds of hours of media drills. But beneath it all, the pressure was building. Jasmine Crockett's ethics inquiry wasn't just a headline anymore. It had legs. Real ones. A reporter raised their hand. Madam Secretary, how do you respond to allegations that several top donors to President Trump's re-election campaign met privately with administration officials days before being offered advisory roles? Leavitt paused, flipping to the prepared notes on the podium. This administration welcomes insight from American business leaders and private citizens. Unlike some members of Congress, we don't shame success. We invite it to the table. Dodging, reframing, classic playbook. But the reporters weren't having it. Is it true that these meetings were off the books? That there were no official visitor logs filed for them? Another pause. Leavitt's voice was even colder now. We follow all legal and ethical guidelines. We are in full compliance. But everyone saw it. That subtle tension in her shoulders. The slight stiffness in her posture. The kind of body language that said, something is off. That same evening, Jasmine Crockett appeared on the Rachel Maddow show. Dressed in bold blue, eyes piercing through the camera, she radiated righteous fire. Karoline Leavitt can spin whatever story she wants, Crockett said. But we've got internal memos, timestamps, even security footage that contradicts their public statements. I'm not asking for transparency anymore. I'm demanding accountability. Rachel leaned forward. Congresswoman, are you suggesting criminal wrongdoing? I'm saying if the White House doesn't start handing over these records willingly, we'll force them. Through the courts, through the Constitution, through whatever tools the law allows. The American people didn't elect Karoline Leavitt. They elected honesty. The internet erupted. Clips from the show hit 10 million views by morning. Hashtags like hashtag CrockettCracksDC and hashtag CarolineCoverup trended worldwide. But more than just likes and shares, something more dangerous was shifting. Moderate voters were starting to listen. Even some House Republicans were quietly backing Crockett's push for more transparency. And that scared the hell out of Karoline. Leavitt sat alone in her White House office that night, lights dimmed, laptop open. On screen, a live feed of cable news. Every channel was dissecting her every word, every half-answer, every silence. She rubbed her temples. The visitor logs, some of them really were off the books. Those private conversations with megadonors weren't just bad optics. They were potentially illegal if they influenced policy. Then her encrypted phone buzzed. Unknown number, she's not stopping. She's got help inside the building. Karoline froze. Unknown number, you have 48 hours to fix this. Or she drops everything. Emails, transcripts, security tapes. Her mind raced. Someone inside the administration had flipped. She stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Then she stood and walked to the mirror across her office. She had built her career on confidence, control, and clean messaging. But now she was bleeding politically. And sharks could smell it. Back on the Hill, Crockett's team was working round the clock. New whistleblowers had come forward. One former White House staffer claimed he had been pressured to delete internal calendar entries related to donor meetings. Crockett's response was immediate. Let's draft subpoenas for internal communication logs, she said, and get the Judiciary Committee involved. If we get 3 more sign-ons, we can fast-track a formal investigative panel. Monica leaned over the desk. You sure you want to take it that far? You go down this road, there's no turning back. Crockett didn't hesitate. They made this a fight. I'm just finishing it. That same night, during a private donor event at Mar-a-Lago, Trump pulled Karoline aside. You losing control of the narrative? He asked, casually sipping Diet Coke. You're the press queen. Press queens don't lose. Karoline forced a smile. I've got it handled. Good. Because if she brings me into it, he said, pointing at the ceiling as if Crockett were watching from above, you better believe you're taking the fall. She swallowed hard. There it was, the real power dynamic. It wasn't Crockett she had to fear. It was being made expendable. The next morning, Jasmine Crockett received a brown envelope at her office. No return address. No sender. Inside was a flash drive. She plugged it in. Her jaw dropped. Video files. Audio files. Internal memos. Names. Dates. Leavitt's private calendar entries. Proof. The kind that ends careers. She looked up at Monica. It's real, she whispered. It's all real? Monica exhaled. What now? Crockett's eyes locked onto the Capitol dome through her window. Now, she said. We dropped the bomb. The next 24 hours felt like a countdown. Inside her office, Jasmine Crockett sat in silence, the only light coming from her laptop screen. The files on the flash drive were damning. Leavitt's handwritten notes referencing favorable cabinet terms in exchange for bundled donations. A leaked calendar showing unofficial meetings with private equity executives. Audio recordings of her coordinating talking points with a Trump-aligned PAC directly contradicting what she'd testified before Congress. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a constitutional crisis waiting to ignite. Monica leaned in, wide-eyed. You sure you want to go nuclear? Crockett's reply came without hesitation. If we don't expose this now, they'll bury it and then they'll come for everyone. By noon, Crockett's office sent a notice to the Oversight Committee and a formal press advisory. An emergency public hearing was being scheduled for 8 p.m. It was unprecedented. Congress didn't meet like this, not without major incident. The entire city held its breath. Journalists scrambled. Networks cleared their primetime schedules. Every major channel went live. And Karoline Leavitt? She was in full damage control mode. You need to resign, hissed Claire Barlow, the deputy chief of staff, as she paced the West Wing hallway. If you step down now, we might be able to pin this on a rogue aide and shield the president. Karoline stood firm. I'm not resigning. You think they'll stop at me? This is about him. They'll gut the whole administration if I go down. James Hanley, the White House counsel, sighed heavily. They have the tapes, Karoline. The calendar. The notes. You're on the record. Karoline's face twisted in quiet fury. Then we fight. We throw doubt on the chain of custody. Call it a deepfake. Say the flash drive was planted. Barlow stared at her, stunned. That's your plan? Lie harder. Karoline looked her dead in the eye. That's been the plan since 2016. 8 p.m. Eastern. The Rayburn House office building was so full, staff were watching from hallways. The rotunda was buzzing, but as Jasmine Crockett took her seat at the center dais, the room fell into a dead hush. The cameras rolled. Crockett tapped the mic. Tonight, I'm not here as a Democrat. I'm here as an elected official sworn to uphold the Constitution. She opened the manila folder. Behind her, a giant screen lit up. Over the past month, this committee has investigated a series of allegations related to unethical conduct by the executive branch. What we have uncovered is deeply troubling. She clicked the remote. A clip played. Leavitt's voice unmistakable. We make the offer after the second check clears. Quietly. Not through official channels. The boss doesn't want a paper trail. The room gasped. On screen next, an internal memo from the White House Communications Office with Leavitt's initials confirming talking points coordinated with private donors. Then the nail in the coffin. A calendar screenshot. Meetings with known donors, dated just days before new appointments were made public. Crockett leaned into the mic again. These are not just lapses in judgment. These are violations of public trust. And they are prosecutable offenses. She didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. Her fury was cold, measured, and devastating. Leavitt was watching the broadcast from a secure location in the White House, hands trembling. Within minutes, phones across D.C. exploded. Lawmakers demanded her resignation. State attorneys general started issuing public calls for federal investigation. Even some Trump allies began to waver, refusing to defend the indefensible. The next morning, Karoline Leavitt stepped into the press briefing room for what would be her last appearance. The room was silent as she approached the podium. She didn't smile, didn't dodge, didn't spin. Instead, her voice shook just slightly as she read from a paper. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as White House press secretary. I deny any criminal wrongdoing, but I refuse to allow this administration's message to be compromised by distractions. Thank you. She walked off before anyone could ask a question. A fall from grace, televised for the world to see. 3 weeks later, Congress passed the Federal Ethics Accountability Act, spurred directly by the Crockett hearings. The bill increased transparency requirements, mandated real-time visitor logs, and criminalized coordination between campaign donors and executive appointments without oversight. Crockett, now a household name, was hailed as the conscience of the Capitol. She graced the cover of Time with the headline, "The Woman Who Said No More." She turned down book deals, ignored cable network offers. When asked what she planned to do next, her answer was simple. Keep going. This was just the first battle. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt disappeared from public life. No interviews, no appearances. Some said she fled to Florida. Others whispered about a tell-all in the works. But Crockett didn't care. For her, it wasn't about revenge. It was about the American people. And reminding those in power, no matter how slick their speeches or shiny their shoes, that they answered to someone. Her, the voters, and the truth.